What is up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Guarani Vision, the first ever podcast dedicated to Paraguayan football in English. As always, I'm Roberto Rojas, and joining me are my two great co-hosts, Fede Perez and Ralph Hannah. And guys, heading into August already, obviously, we're right into deep of the Clausura competitions. Obviously, what's been going on in Paraguay domestically is obviously of interest that we're going to talk about today. Obviously, we speak as the European seasons are about to begin or have begun, actually, depending on what league and country we are. Obviously, we see some players that are obviously getting their minutes over there in the top 5 leagues in Europe. Some of them also getting some goals in MLS. And obviously something in Mexico as well. Copa Libertadores, we got some Paraguayans playing there as well that we're definitely going to be expected on and talking about hopefully very, very soon. Looking into, I guess, sticking into Europe, we did see one little transfer be made a couple of days ago, guys, with a young kid in Hugo Cuenca leaving Deportivo Capietat, heading to Milan, the 16-year-old defender playing over there for the Rossoneri, going to be on the academy team, and obviously will train with the first team as well. But it's very interesting to see what these guys are going to do. So we can definitely talk about that as well. But let's get into this discussion. Let me get my co-host in here. Let me go to Ralph first, because you'd posted a video the other day about how maybe one certain politician might have a chance to play for the Premier League champions Man City. I mean, I from what I've heard, I think they're stacked at right wing. That's kind of been my big issue. So I don't know if he'll have the opportunity to play for Pep Guardiola from what I've heard.
Well, he doesn't think that either, because that was Nicanor said. He said something like, "There's as much chance of it happening as me playing for Man City. If he was a left back, he'd have a shout, but." But otherwise, I don't think he's getting in there. Yeah, I'm good, Roberto. Like, happy to see the league starting. Like everybody, kind of bummed that Julio Enciso didn't travel to Old Trafford, but he was at Selhurst Park last night as we record, playing for the academy, and I know a couple of guys went down there, like from our friendship group, a Paraguayan in London. And so that was cool that he's at least got some minutes under his belt, and we'll see what happens to him. And then, we're kind of warming up for the Superclasico. Is always the big game on the calendar that everyone looks forward to. And we've got, I would say, I don't know, both teams, both managers, maybe under a little bit of pressure, which we might be talking about. So I think it's going to be an interesting matchup this Sunday in the Manuel Ferreira, because they're playing it at Olympia's ground, which is quite rare that they take it there and not to Defensores del Chaco.
Yeah, absolutely. And Fede, going into you on this one, I think, obviously it's kind of yin and yang for both Cerro and Olimpia. We'll talk about Cerro in a minute, but obviously what happened with Olimpia was actually some big news, that they were able to get some money to help, obviously refinance the transfer of, or at least the debt that was needed to be paid to Dinamo Kiev for Delis Gonzalez, with a little bit of help from the CONMEBOL president, Alejandro Dominguez. So from an Olympia standpoint, I think obviously these big news comes at a right time, and maybe serves as kind of motivation heading into this Superclasico.
Yeah, first of all, hi, Roberto. Hi, Ralph. Hi to everybody listening to Guarani Vision, like always. Yeah, all the way from Paraguay this winter, waiting for a new Superclasico. And yeah, Olimpia had some good news these last couple of days. Actually, the last 2 games for Olimpia were pretty well. After losing to Tacuary, they got a couple of wins, a couple of big wins, actually, winning Copa Paraguay, and then also winning in the local league against Ameliano. So it's been pretty good news, and especially the situation that has been a problem during the whole year. They have so many debts, they owe so much money, and they also have sanctions even from FIFA. And apparently this is coming to an end, or at least one of those big cases that Olimpia was waiting on, which was Delis Gonzalez, this situation from 2005, maybe even. I mean, they've been on to it for a while, and finally the Ukrainians have taken the pressure off. Apparently there's been an agreement to the new payments, the new way that Olimpia wants to pay. The Ukrainians had wanted nothing to do with Olimpia and the way that they wanted to pay before, and that's why Alejandro Dominguez, the CONMEBOL president, had to come in this situation and had a couple of meetings, had a couple of chats with the Dinamo Kiev people, and he was important. He was vital. I understand that people it will catch people's attention, but he was a very important person back in the day in Olympia, and he's always there with the new president also, and there's a good relationship between him and the Dominguez family, which is a very traditional family also for Olympia. His dad's birthday was just last week. His dad was the biggest president in Olympia's history. So there is that story when it gets tight for Olympia, the Dominguez family is always there, Roberto. But that's just one of the many topics we got to talk about in this Libertadores. What am I talking about? Superclasico preview. Libertadores, they played back in Libertadores, and Ralph said they're going to play in Tiago Manuel Ferreira. Actually, Olimpia played in those games in Libertadores in Defensores del Chaco, so it is going to change up for this clausura, just because I don't think they can fill up the Defensores right now.
Absolutely. It'll be the fourth encounter actually between these two sides, which, it doesn't happen as much during the year. Obviously, we see a home and away fixture happen, obviously do it in the Libertadores. So now they do it again in the Clausura. And obviously all the attention is going into that game, guys. Sorry, fifth time, actually. Forget me. 2 times they played in the Apertura and then twice in the Libertadores. So the 5th time in 2022. So obviously a lot of pressure and expectation given to that. But we have to go straight into the team that has kind of been feeling a bit lackluster lately, and that's Cerro Porteño. Obviously, despite leading the league currently in the Clausura, they're coming off a embarrassing elimination from second division side Rubio New, losing 1-0 in the Copa Paraguay, a tournament that, obviously we spoke about and how we kind of feared as if though maybe some of these teams aren't giving that much importance, depending on what part of how you view success in a particular season, and they fell flat on their face on this one. And then only 3 days later to take on Nacional and draw 0-0. Ralph, I'll go to you on this one because it really is interesting to see the Cerro Porteño side and kind of the expectation that we always talk about. I mean, obviously this is a side that on its day has to compete to win the domestic titles, to win a league title or, a Copa Paraguay. And they haven't done so in the domestic perspective, domestic cup, I should say. But, I don't know if we can really see a crisis being made as of yet. Mini crisis, yes, absolutely. But I have already seen some overreaction on social media from the press. So many people are already talking about how Chigashi should go and that they should start moving forward. At this stage, no, I don't think it's possible for him to leave. But, maybe heading in 2023, yes, maybe they could start thinking about something. But honestly, and Fede, you can jump in on this one as well. I don't see if there was anyone better aside maybe from 1 or 2 names in Paraguayan football, or even at all, that can really go in and take his job as center boss.
Yeah, I think that's one of the points is who could do any better. But I think going back to some of your first point was it's not really that bad. It's not really such a crisis. It's just got a bit stale. It reminds me a lot of Arsenal in the later years under Arsene Wenger, right? When they weren't doing particularly badly, but it just felt that nothing was going to happen, right? That you needed some kind of change. And I think part of the problem with Cerro is they've been so good defensively, but they haven't been very exciting going forward. And so even when they are winning, like they won their opening 4 games of the league season, you didn't really feel blown away by this side because they were just kind of grinding out the results and doing just enough. They don't really have a goal scorer at the moment because Martins Moreno isn't scoring the goals they wanted. Samudio came in and scored twice, but now he hasn't done anything since. And so they don't have that excitement around the team, And so when things start going badly like this, like they lost to Rubio New, Chiquiase made 11 changes for the game against Nacional. This is to say, right, forget about that. And then they drew 0-0 against 10 men. So even with those 11 changes, nothing happened. Then I think, people are getting maybe a bit impatient, and there's just that feeling that it's gone a bit stale. And then, yeah, to your second point, just to develop on that about, is there anybody better? I mean, there really isn't. I don't think it's, unless they go and get Carnero, right, at Libertad. But you look at, I mean, he's been at Cerro before. People like Gustavo Florentino, who went away, he's actually come back, and he's come back to General Caballero, who's won the league with him, Tiburon Torres, but he's at Resistencia. I don't think any of these people would be the coaches to take it to another level. So then you will have to look abroad. And I think looking abroad, as we've always seen, or as Paraguayan owners have always seen, it's a bit of a risk, right? You might get someone in that's willing to stay and see it out for a year or 18 months, or you get people that come in, take some money and go. I was just worried before we got on recording, I was watching Nacional lose to Goyanense with Luis Suarez on the bench. And who is the manager of Nacional? It was Repeto, right? Pablo Repeto came in and with Olimpia and was a disaster. And that was an example of trying to bring in a foreign coach with a reputation and they can't do anything. So, yeah, I think, I mean, looking at Cerro, I think they're looking good in terms of they're strong enough to see out the season and possibly win the league and almost definitely qualify for Libertadores. So again, I don't think it's too much like panic stations just yet. The talk maybe comes next year of if we want to really go for Libertadores, do we have someone that's maybe more proven in cup competitions?
It's a very interesting topic. I don't like it that Roberto is the one bringing it up, and I didn't think that was going to be the main topic in the Superclasico, just because Cerro Porteño signed with their coach at the beginning of the year, one of the longest contracts I've ever seen a coach sign here in Paraguay. I think he has a contract up to like 2025 or something like that. So I don't think it's even on the table, the discussion. I mean, why would you sign a coach for so many years if you're going to take him out after the first failures? Obviously from the board, they're going to have to show that support. They're going to have to show that backup when the team has problems, when the team can't get the results. But I don't get the drama really, because they're on the first place. They had a really good apertura, but there is stuff on their shoulders. I mean, this team lost really bad to Palmeiras. Fans do not get over that very easily. It was not the first time that Arce did not do well in the international stage. And yeah, you have the local league, but that's all you have left now, because Copa Paraguay, you played one game and it was over for you against Rubio New. And when you had to show your alternative squad, where you had to show the young players, they didn't really show up, and Rubio New really earned that one. And it was just a 1-0, but you didn't see much out of Cerro. You didn't see much out of that team that supposedly is waiting there for the young players to come in and take the spotlight. And that was kind of worrisome in my way of seeing it, just because Chiqui Arce is not just on the first team, Roberto. He has responsibility, obviously, with what happens on the youth leagues also. And just to see that team, just to see that that's what is behind the first team, I was kind of worried about that, because that's supposed to be the future of Cerro Porteño, and not just a team that's trying to get to the final stages of Copa Paraguay, where I believe Cerro had the obligation to make it at least to the semifinals, especially seeing that bracket where Cerro Porteño pretty much had it. So you have those big failures on one side, and you have a coach that has his style, but he hasn't been able to get the best out of his players lately. And I don't think he's picking out well either. So yeah, he needs to do a better job in these very important games that are coming up, especially because you're seeing Libertad picking it up again. And it does look right now that it is again between Libertad and Cerro Porteño, unless somebody can get into the discussion. That somebody could be Olimpia if they win this big game also, Roberto.
Yeah, and I think, heading into that and previewing the Superclasico, obviously, I think, from my perspective, and I would like to hear your thoughts, I think, Olimpia have every right to feel a bit motivated. Obviously, I think the last time that they played each other, Olimpia did beat them. One of the rare times, and Ralph actually pointed this out in the stat, one of the rare times that Cerro have actually lost at home in recent memory. So, Olimpia, I have every right to feel motivated. They've done it in the Superclasico, in the Apertura. They've done it in the Libertadores. They were able to get some kind of historical bragging rights, at least for this year. So Fede, I mean, and on top of the news that has been going on from obviously this whole situation with Derlis and how their form is a bit different in comparison to Cerro. Let's be real. Olimpia are still in the Copa Paraguay. They could still win a title. Olimpia are in the driver's seat, actually, to really get their season back on track if they're able to get a win at home this weekend.
Yeah, and they really need it also. I think just as Cerro Porteño, they have the obligation to win this clausura to try to make it straight to the Libertadores stage group next year. And yeah, they're going to feel that pressure, I believe, in this game to be the team that looks for the win. But hey, maybe a draw isn't that bad for Olimpia. Just seeing the standings right now, just seeing that you're going to face up against a tough opponent. I want to see how the match goes, but yeah, you're going to have fans by your side. I've seen Olimpia's numbers lately playing at home. They've become a better team. They've looked better at home. And I also think that was taken into consideration when they thought, between the head coach and the president, where are we going to play this game? Are we going to play in Defensores del Chaco? Maybe even take it to Ciudad del Este, where teams are taking games again. But no, they wanted to play it at home, and just because they can still catch up, they can still they can still make a run for it here in this Apertura, even though they lost a couple of games. I think this Olimpia side has everything to grow, especially because you're seeing that players are coming back. Marcos Gomez is getting his spot back in the midfield. He had Julio Cáceres has a couple of doubts in defense, but hey, he's had these doubts pretty much all season. So that's always the big depth in Olimpia, just seeing a better team in defense. And in offense, right now you have two players. You have Guillermo Paiva and you have Brian Montenegro coming in pretty much in every game and scoring or making it happen, making a big play. Derlis Gonzalez is the big star in this team, and he's healthy. He's been playing lately. He's been scoring. Alex Silva also. So Olimpia is ready for the challenge, I believe, Roberto. It is coming in the right moment in this clausura, and Cerro has yet to lost a game. So yeah, all the motivation, I believe, is on Olimpia's side, especially because they're going to play with their fans by their side.
Yeah, they used to be on a really bad run in the Manuel Ferreira. They kept losing games. I think at one point they had lost 7 in a row or something. But for whatever he's done, Julio César Cáceres has turned that right around. They've actually won their last 8. So they're on a really good winning run. Technically the last home game they lost in the league was to Cerro, but that was in the Defensores del Chaco. So they're on a really good run at home in the stadium. And it's quite an interesting contrast, right? Because I was saying before, Cerro has a very good defense. When Pulpito Duarte and Patiño play together, and Jean in goal, it's really only Libertad that have ever shown them much kind of problems in league games. Of course, they've had the occasional surprise defeat, but really they look very comfortable. And then in Copa Libertadores, we know it's a different thing. They've struggled against Brazilian sides. Olimpia are a bit of a mess defensively, and I thought it was very interesting that against Emiliano, Luis Zarate had come back from suspension and he didn't get into the first team, which I was kind of surprised about because they haven't been defending very well in Gamarra and Salcedo together, but they did end up keeping their clean sheet. But what Olimpia's strength is going forward, like Fede was saying, you have Derlis Gonzalez, who's one of the best players in this league going forward, and probably he's only in the league because of what we were mentioning in the intro about the debt with Dynamo Kiev and things that he feels he kind of has to be there. But so they have all these attacking players and creative players because of Montenegro, Paiva, Santi Vera. But they're not very good defensively. And then you have a Cerro that's very strong defensively, but going forward, they haven't clicked really at any point, I think. We rarely see Cerro with this really free-flowing football. It's often very patient and slow and purposeful, but it's not like really expansive and exciting and free-flowing. So it's going to be a really good contrast to see which wins out, right? Does Cerro's defense win out, or does Olimpia's attack, and vice versa? Does Cerro's kind of not so good attack against Olimpia's not so good defense, like which what tips the balance. So it's going to be an interesting matchup, I think, from that side of things.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that there are a lot of really duels that need to be played in. And obviously, I think for both these teams, they kind of look at this as kind of the match that kind of, I don't want to say too early on, but they could define their season. I mean, Fede, this is the one that, it doesn't matter where you are on the table, how bad or how good your season is or the club is. You don't want to lose this game. You don't want to lose a Superclasico.
No, obviously there's so much behind it, and even though there is still another Super Classico is left in this year at least, and you said I think it's like the fifth one in this year. The fans have had so many, but since it's so important for these two clubs to try to get the clausura, these 3 points feel like it is a big thing. So I think it is going to have that excitement behind it. And it is totally different, the atmosphere also of playing in Defensores de Chaco than playing in Tigo Manuel Ferreira. The fans are closer to the action. They're going to be on top of every game. Yeah, even the bench feels the pressure. Ralph has been there a couple of times. I don't know if Roberto has been to the Tigo Manuel Ferreira. I know he's been to the Nueva Olla.
I have been to the.
I don't know why he makes that difference when he's here in Asunción, but he does that, and I think it's going to be totally. It's going to be a great, exciting game, especially just like you said. There's a lot of players that can stand out. But, the managers also, I mean, Julio Cáceres, he's been there for a while now in Olimpia. So he's kind of gotten the hang of playing against Chiqui Arce. In those first Superclásicos, I would always say, that tactical battle between the coaches, I always saw Chiqui Arce getting the first hand and putting a better team on the field. But lately, I felt that, Julio Cáceres' strategy in the Superclásico has gotten better. And his players are looking really well right now. And just Cerro have so many doubts, so many problems in the locker room, even players discussing between each other just because they can't get the best out there. So it could be, if I look at if one of these two teams loses, who's going to lose the most? I think Cerro Porteño. I think if Cerro loses this game, I mean that locker room is going to be on top of the coach also, and the fans are going to be on top of this story, and it's not going to be easy for them, even though they're still going to be in that first spot. I think that even if they lose, they're still going to be in that first spot, or they could lose it in this week, Roberto. No, they're still going to be there.
No, they would still be there because there's still a significant point difference with Nacional. So
it's going to be a mood changer if they lose it.
Oh well, then that makes it even bigger of an obligation for them. And Fede, from what I'm assuming, and I don't want to get into. Actually, you know what? I will get into predictions. Why not? Let's do it. Superclásico. You're leading into an Olympia win, aren't you? Or how are you feeling about this one?
Well, I was with Olympia at the beginning of this tournament. So yeah, in these big games, I am going to stick with Julio Cáceres, even though he really had a lot of doubts at the beginning of the tournament, especially with this situation with the young players and trying to get them to behave their personal life, to keep it off the social media. There was trouble with that situation in the locker room, but apparently players are behaving again. And after seeing, them having such a bad game against Taquari and that meltdown in those last minutes, I think they really bounced from it these last two games. And this is the game for them right now. And I think Olympia is made for these big games this year. They've done well in these kind of games, in these kind of stages. And I did not like what I saw from Cerro Porteño last weekend around. I had them right in front of me in that Nacional in that second half. They did not know how to resolve the problem. They had that puzzle that was Nacional that played a really well game. And watch out for Nacional also. I really like what I've seen out of them in this tournament. And they're that third, fourth team that's just waiting for Libertad, and Cerro Porteño have a bad tournament and try to get in there also in the fight. But if I have to predict in one of these two teams in the Superclásico, I'm making it too long. I'm going for Olympia.
Interesting.
By just a goal.
As any tight Superclásico may be, always ones with little goals. Ralph, how are you siding on this one? Are you going for the host, or giving a little bit of hope for the team from Barrio Obrero?
Well, I'm looking at it, and I mean, Julio Cesar Caceres always got it right. I mean, he came in for the Supercopa. They won that. They won in the La Nueva Olla the first time that they'd won there. And then, okay, they did lose the 4-0 to Cerro in the league, but that was a strange game because it came 3 days before they're playing the Copa Libertadores. And at that point, the Copa Libertadores game was more important. And then they won the Copa Libertadores game that they needed to. So what you can see is, I mean, Olympia have grounded out when they have to in these games. And so I think I'm going to side with Fede on this one, that is looking, the momentum shift is in Olympia's favor. If this game had come 2 games ago, I would have said Cerro. But I think with the momentum shifting, it is looking like an Olympia win. And also for Cerro, I mean, it just gets worse, by the way. I was looking in their fixtures. After this, they have Guarani, then they get General Caballero, but then they get Libertad. So they've got the next 4 games, 3 of them are really big matches, and it's going to look difficult for them all. We'll have to see where they stand, 4 games from now. But I think for the prediction, Olympia 1-0, which has happened. Well, yeah, that's what happened last time. They won 1-0 in the Libertadores.
I think it's going to be a tight affair, and I think I'm going to have to side with agreement. I don't feel confident in the Cerro side. I look at the recent form. Yes, they have conceded 1 goal this entire campaign in the Clausura, and they scored 7. But still, you see the side grinding out results, like you guys had mentioned. Julio Cesar Cáceres seems to be getting the better of Chiqui Arce of this year. Playing at home in front of that crowd, yes, but I've been to the Barahona before. Those fans really are on you. So, it really will be a big crowd and kind of a rowdy one that I think so. So, yeah, I think all the factors that go into this are siding for Olympia. So I'm gonna go for an Olympia win in this one, 1-0. And boy, I mean, guys, if that were to happen, then we have Fede, you were talking about how Libertad and Cerro seems to be the only teams that are starting to get into that conversation of who could realistically win the league title. But, Nacional are right there banging on the door. And if Olympia get this win, they're in that title race too. I got to imagine, don't you think?
Yeah, especially it's going to be that booster that locker room is going to need, right? After that, every match is going to be probably with way more fans on the stands, and people are really going to be after the campaign, or it could be totally over for Olympia, even for the long term. I mean, you were talking to us before the show started. The numbers for the year, especially to qualify for the Libertadores. In the case that Cerro Porteño does not win, or the second tournament, or it either does Olympia. Right now, it's Libertad, the only team that has qualified to the group stage of Libertadores for next year. So it could be over for Olympia also in that sense, because Cerro Porteño made a whole bunch of points, way more than Olympia already in the Apertura. So there's a big difference there also, where Olympia has to be careful, because it could be a very big gap if Cerro Porteño wins this one. I'm liking what I'm seeing from Julio Cáceres lately. I think he's got that locker room behind him again after some doubts, after I thought that he could even lose the job. But this is what Olympia has right now. I mean, you're not going to see a very exciting team. He said it several times. We don't have players to get out there and be the best team in the Paraguayan league. We're doing what we can with what we have. But, these players that came in this second part of the year have been very important. Hugo Fernandez, Brian has also scored a couple of important goals so far. So I think these players are coming in hot, and they're going to probably get Fernando Cardoso back in that left midfield, unless we see Bruno Recalde again, who has been the under 19 lately. He's played a lot these last couple of games, and he's kind of surprised me also. This is a very exciting kid. He's only 18. He could be one of those new players to play a Superclasico. I don't think he's going to be the only one. I think we're going to see some from Cerro Porteño also. Brian Zamudio has had a brace a couple of games ago, and I think he's going to play his first Superclasico also. And, for those players, it is going to be a special one. And it's going to be nice to see how they behave in a stage like that, in a big game like this one. It's always good, because those games are not for everyone, Roberto.
No, no, they're not. It doesn't matter what country you're in, any kind of derby. If you're up for the pressure, you got to be up for it on the pitch. So I completely agree. And, switching gears, and there's a good segue that you made, Fede, about some of those young players, because obviously you wanted to mention about some of those young players that are starting to come up. Obviously, with this new U19 rule, obviously Paraguayan teams have the obligation to play these players after a certain amount of time, and you need to get some sort of minutes before the end of the club tour season. So, why don't you just dive deep into that and look at some of the players that, maybe for some that are, kind of the hipsters, maybe want to get some players to watch out for in future tournaments or want to get into Paraguayan football. What are some of the names that have reached your eye?
Yeah, we actually talked about this situation a couple of episodes ago. I believe that the teams were obligated to put under 19 players. And this is a situation that's going on in Paraguay because we have not been to the last World Cups and we need to promote players. We need new players to come out. And also because the clubs don't work well with the young leagues, don't work well with the kids. So this is pretty much a way to make them look way more into the young players and have them ready for the big stage to play in the first team. And you could see it happening straight away that many of the clubs that are in the first and top division are not ready. They don't have players pretty much on their squad. They did not get prepared for this. And this is the situation that I'm really worried about because this speaks very bad about our youth leagues and what they have under there, 12 de Octubre, Resistencia, Guaireña, they pretty much had to loan players from other places. And you're just seeing it now in the 4th, 5th week, new names, kids that are coming up, and they're just not ready for it. They're putting them in there 4 or 5 minutes, the last couple of minutes of the game. And it's shameful to see it, just because that's not the spirit of the law. And yes, there are other players that I do think are coming about. I talked about in Olympia, Bruno Ricalde. He's caught my eyes, just 18 years old. He's one of those players that is getting time. Fernando Velar, also in Cerro Porteño, we mentioned him. He's only 18 years old, but hey, he started his career several years ago, but he's only 18, and he's filling that spot in Cerro Porteño. In Nacional, in the first games, Francisco Morel caught everybody's attention, scoring a couple of goals back to back, and in this last game, Nacional against Cerro Porteño, Sergio Freitas had a huge game. Actually, he's only 23 years old. This is a player that had already had his debut a couple of seasons ago, and he's kind of coming back with this coach, with Pedro Saravia now. And I was really surprised by his level. He really put it out there, and Cerro Porteño's defense had trouble with him. Particularly in this last game, I'm hoping for him to have a good season. Also, Carlos Espinola is coming back from an injury. He's also a vital player in Nacional. He's only 22 years old. Not just talking about the under 19 rule, but other players that have come about in these last couple of seasons that you're waiting for these players to have a breakthrough season and maybe even head out, maybe even leave the country. But it's really hard, Ralph, right now to find those under 19 players, those gems that people talk about. Maybe Diego Gomez in Libertad. Libertad is a club that works really well in the youth leagues. That's why they even gave out so many players in loans to other clubs because they just have so much. But it's really hard, Rob. Teams are not working well in that sense.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, Diego Gomez, you just mentioned at the end, he's the player that's, I think, impressed me most from that group because he walks into a midfield that's of the champions, and he has to kind of impress. And what I found with him is he's very interesting going forward. So he's not so much a box-to-box midfielder. He's actually got some more like attacking intent to him, and we didn't see it at first, but now I think he scored in the last 2 games. So he's starting to show some of that quality he has going forward, which is quite interesting for to have like an attacking midfielder that plays down the middle rather than wingers and things that we've also seen a few of. But yeah, it's Libertad. In a way, Libertad's success is to the detriment of the rest of the league because Libertad kind of scoop up all the best players because they have more resources. They're the ones that are really doing the hard work and going outside of Asuncion and looking for players and bringing them in. we talked a lot about Julio Enciso. Julio Enciso is from the countryside in Paraguay. I mean, apparently Guarani were out there looking for players around there too, but really no one's doing that work. It's usually the parents and the kids have to do the hard work of coming to the clubs and making the effort and kind of sacrificing a lot of things to try and be able to play, whereas Libertad make it easier for those kids, and that's why they have most of the talent. And what we see again is there's always this, because you have a lot of short-termism in Paraguay with the managers as well. The managers are under pressure. So 12 de Octubre or General Caballero, those coaches know they might only be in for 6 months or so. So they need to get results quickly. And so the pressure on them there, I think, makes them tend to go towards the veterans. 12 de Octubre is the biggest example, right? Because they've just got, their average age is 29, I think. It's almost 30 years old. And so that's partly produced by this short-termism that comes from even above the coaches, from the owners, so they're very quick to change coaches. But let's see if this rule can hopefully bring up a few players that we weren't expecting. I think Olympia is very interesting as well. The under-20s have just been called up for the Paraguay national team, and they have a couple of players that we haven't even seen in the Olympia first team squad that are in the Paraguay under-20s. So I think there's actually, Olympia particularly have a lot of quality, and these, I'm talking mostly strikers, mostly forwards. So that's very interesting. And then maybe some good news to just to contrast with what Fede was saying. The under-17s went to Uruguay. They got a win and a draw. They're coached by Aldo Bobadilla. And I think that's good news to see some of our Paraguay youth teams having regular games again, because it's all stopped, of course, because of the pandemic. But having some of these regular games as we build up to the Sudamericanos that come in 2023. So let's see if, fingers crossed, at least if we're getting things right at the under-15s, under-17s level, by the time they're under-19s and ready to play in the senior leagues, they've got a good foundation behind them.
Well, we're mentioning all these players, Roberto, because we're looking at the future. You know, we're going to have very important friendly games for the national team this year, straight up ahead. I think we have a couple also here in August. I believe you guys are going to get the chance to see our national team up close. And apparently, Esteloto's going to look at our domestic players. He's going to look at our local league. So I was looking and making this list mainly thinking on that, thinking on the future, because you don't only have to think about a team to try to get results right now, but you have to look at the future. The next World Cup is 4 years ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's kind of vital into looking at how we can indeed promote these young players and see if they're up for the task to play on the national team, to see what they can do if they're successful at their clubs, to perhaps go out and try it out at a different league. I think that's only the most that we can expect from them. And so I think it'll be interesting to see what Barros Schelotto does in these friendlies, to see what kind of domestic players he calls up, what kind of idea and kind of plan that he has put for this national team, because that's the only way to do it. The only way is to get that experience, to really look into this new generation and to see what can be done in order to achieve the goals that they want to achieve. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there, guys, as we close off another great episode of Guarani Vision. For myself, Roberto Rojas, Fede Perez, and Ralph Hannah, thank you so much for listening in. See you soon.